Good morning, students. Today we are going to see the continuation of the last lesson, the Unit 6 Prose. The last lesson already in the previous class I have taught you the half of the portion. So let's take a quick look on the previous class portion. So here this story tells the narrator, a little boy, his name is Franz. So he was one particular day he was late at school and he was afraid because his teacher Mr. Hammer will scold him, so he was afraid and he does not learn the lesson of the rule of participles. So he thought spending the day out to cut the class, spending the day out. And on his way, he saw there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board. So usually all the news they put up on the bulletin board. So today also some new news has put up on the bulletin board. So he has seen a crowd in front of the bulletin board. And the usual scene, when the school began, the usual scene, the great bustle. And the great bustle means the teachers and students, they are moving in an energetic manner. Then opening and closing of the desks. Then the lessons repeated in unison. The teachers' rulers on rapping on the table. These are the usual scene when the school began every day. And he was also afraid because he is late at school and he does not learn the lesson. So he was afraid, but that particular day nothing was happened. His teacher, Mr. Hammer, he also very politely, kind manner, he told him to take his seat. So after recover his view, he noticed his teacher dressed up his best attire. So this made him to get confusion. And he also noticed in the village people, the old houser, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others, they are also occupying in the last benches. This made him getting more confusion because why the crowd, he has seen the crowd in front of the bulletin board, and why today the entire class is so quiet. So what's the reason behind that, and why his teacher dressed at his best attire, and why the village people are occupying in the last benches. So these questions made him to getting more confusion. Now he is going to get the answer because when Mr. Hamel announced, this is the last class I shall give you, because the Berlin has ordered to teach only German in the schools of these two districts, the Alsace and Lorraine. Alsace and Lorraine. So now he understood what is happening here. So when he heard the news, he was shocked because this is the last class for learning French, and for the idea, his teacher, Mr. Hamel, also going away with them. So he will not get to see him again. So he was very shocked, and this is the contrast, because earlier he was afraid of his hand ruler and his scolding, but now he started to liking his teacher, and he is very serious to listen the classes. He is very attentive, and he is very attentive to listen the classes. Then why the village man occupying the back of the classroom? Because they had gone to school more in order to respect and gratitude towards Mr. Hamel for his 40 years teaching. So that's the reason only they came and occupying in the classroom. Now he understood everything. So this much only we have already seen. Now let's move on to today's class. While I was thinking of all this, I heard my name called. It was my turn to recite. What would I not have given to be able to say that dreadful rule for the participle all through, very loud and clear and without one mistake. But I got mixed up all the first words and stood there holding on to my desk, my heart beating and not daring to look up. So these all the thoughts going on his mind, because why his teacher dressed up, and now he heard the news. Now he know the matter. So this is the last class for French, and his teacher also going away with them. So everything he heard, he knew that. So all the thought is going on his mind. Immediately he hears his teacher called him to recite the rules for the participle, because because it is his time to recite the rule. So immediately he gets nervous and he fumbles after speaking a few words because he does not learn the lesson. So fumbles means struggle, nervously, getting nervous or shivering. Okay, so after speaking a few words, he does not he does not learn the lesson. That's why he is fumbles there. And suppose if he knows the lesson, he can able to speak all of it at once without one mistake. But he does not learn the lesson. He is not able to speak or recite the rules for participles, and he fumbles after speaking a few words. The next paragraph. I heard Mr. Hemant say to me, I won't scold you, little friends. You must feel bad enough. See how it is. Every day we have said to ourselves, but I have plenty of time. I will learn tomorrow. And now you see where we have come out. Oh, that's a great trouble with Alsace. She puts off learning till tomorrow. Now those fellows out there will have the right to say to you, how is it? You pretend to be Frenchman, and yet you can neither speak nor write your own language. But you are not the worst, poor little friends. We have all a great deal to reproach ourselves with. So now, but Mr. Hemant says, you won't afraid, little friends. I will not scold you because you will feel ashamed of yourself that you are not able to recite the lesson or rule of the participles. So I won't scold you, little friends. And he wants him to introspect. He tries to examine his thoughts and feelings. Anyhow, finally he realizes, the Franz realizes the importance of the language or the importance of the education. Then Mr. Hemant says, we the people, the human being, they have the tendency to postponing or putting their works to the next day. They think they have plenty of time to do the things, and they are not doing the work in the apt time or in correct day or in the day itself, and they are putting off or they are postponing to the next day. But what happened now? Now you see where we have come out. Now this is our last lesson. This is our last class. The time is over to learn the French. So they do not learn anything in the last moment. Then he says sarcastically means humorously, he says the German soldiers will laugh at all the Frenchmen because they do not know their own language. So they will laugh. That your parents were not anxious enough to have you learn. They prefer to put you to work on a farm or at the mills, so as to have a little more money. And I have been to blame also. Have I not often sent you to water my flowers instead of learning your lessons? And when I wanted to go fishing, did I not give you, just to give you a holiday? So then Mr. Hemant, his French teacher, he is blaming the narrator parents, the Franz parents, and also himself. So why he blaming the narrator parents means the parents are expecting the Franz should work at a farm or any sawmill and earn little more money rather than providing him the education. So they are expecting. So now Mr. Hemant, his French teacher, blaming his parents, the narrator parents. And he also blaming himself. Why he blaming himself means he didn't make the students to learn the French lessons on the day itself. So and instead of that, he sent the students or he made the students to water his plants. And whenever he wanted to go fishing, immediately he declared or he announced the holiday for them. So he blaming himself. Nobody is very serious. Now the two questions. What was the Franz asked to tell? Was he able to answer? So what was Franz asked to tell? What the teacher, Mr. Hemant, what did he tell him to read or recite? Mr. Hemant asked him to tell the rules of the participle. Was he able to answer? No, he was not not able to answer because he does not learn the lesson. Why did Mr. Hemal blame himself? Why did Mr. Hemal, his French teacher, blame himself? Because he blamed himself because he made the students to say what are his plans or what are his flaws instead of learning their lessons. And whenever he wanted to go fishing, immediately he declared or he announced for holiday for them. So he blamed himself. Then from one thing to another, Mr. Hemal went on to talk of the French language, saying that it was the most beautiful language in the world, the clearest, the most logical, that we must guard it among us and never forget it. Because when people are enslaved, as long as they hold fast to their language, it is as if they had the key to their prison. Then he opened a grammar and read our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood it. All he said seemed so easy, so easy. I think too that I had never listened so carefully and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. It seemed at most as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. Then Mr. Hemal, he started to praise the French language. He says for being the most beautiful language in the world. The French language is the most beautiful language in the world and it is the clearest and logical language in the world. So all the French people should guard their language. You should know your language. You never forget the language. So if you know the language, it is the key to the prison. So he says, if you want to escape from the prison, now they are enslaved under German, the foreigners. So he says, if you want to escape from slave, you should hold on your language or you should know your language. So after that, he read out the grammar lesson to the class. Franz was very serious because he is thinking it is the last lesson to learn the French class and his teacher also going away with him and he will not get to meet him again. So he is very attentive and he was amazed that once he understood what Mr. Hemal has taught, immediately he understood. So now he is thinking previously I didn't listen the class, that's why I don't understand. Now when he taught Mr. Hemal, immediately I understood everything in one time at once. The grammar lesson, the followed by the writing lesson. So after finishing the grammar lesson, first I will read and I will explain. After the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day, Mr. Hemal had new copies for us, written in a beautiful round-handed France Alsace. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom, hung from the rod at the top of our desk. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work and how quiet it was. The only sound was the scratching of the pens over the paper when some beetles flew in, but nobody paid attention to them, not even the littlest one, who worked right on tracing their fish hooks as if that was French too. On the roof of the pigeons cooed very low, and I thought to myself, will they make them sing in German, even the pigeons? So grammar lesson, they follow the writing lesson. Now Mr. Hemal, his French teacher, he issued the round-handed beautiful new notebooks to the students. And they got the new notebooks where the France Alsace, these words were written beautifully in the notebook. So this sense made them or develop the patriotism in the class, and this is the unusual feeling that they had. Usually, previously they are only interested to be escaped from the class rather than listening. Okay, so now they are very interested to listening because as it is his last class, so they have the bonding with the country. After that, they heard the song only was the scratching of the pens. Now the entire class is so quiet. Now they heard the sound, only the paper, the pen was scratching over the paper. That sound only they could be heard. And some littlest beetles also entered the class, but nobody paid attention because they are very attentive in the classroom as it was their last lesson, so last French class. And immediately the Mr. Franz tried out himself. He thought himself whether the German people or the German soldiers will force the pigeons to sing or speak in German language. So just he is thinking himself. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw Mr. Heyman sitting motionless in his chair and gazing first at one thing, then at another, as if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom. Fancy for 40 years, he had been there in the same place with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him just like that. Only the desks and benches had been all smooth, the walnut trees in the garden were taller, and the hope vine that he had planted himself twined about the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above me, packing their trunks, for they must leave the country the next day. So now Mr. Hamel, he is looking around the classroom. He is gazing around the classroom because this is the class he has teaching for the 40 years. And he is looking at the bench and desk, he is looking at the garden, and he is looking at in front of the classroom. So when he is looking at the garden, he noticed his already he has planted the walnut trees. So it has grown taller, and the whole point it is climbed up of the roof. So everything he is looking each and everything one by one, and he tries to fix it in his mind, or he tries to memorize all the scene. And they can hear his sister packing of his bags on the first floor of the school. Okay, so because they must leave the country the next day. This is the last class. This is the last French class, and all the French teachers were asked to leave from these schools. So his sister is packing his bags on the first floor of the school. And now two more questions. What did Mr. Hamel say about the French language? So what did he say about the French language? French language is the most beautiful language in the world, and it is also clearest and logical language. So all the French people should know the language. Mainly he is saying the language is the key to get freedom. So you must hold on your language, or you should know your language. Then how many years had Mr. Hamel been in the village? So the Mr. Hamel had been in the village for 40 years. Okay. Then but he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history, and then the babies chanted their ba, baby, boo, boo. Down there at the back of the room, old Haza had put on his spectacles and holding his primer in both hands, spelled the letters with them. You could see that he too was crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. Oh, how well I remember it, that the last lesson. So, and now the babies also chanted. They are also telling how we are singing the rhymes Baba Black Sheep. So like that, the students also, they are just reading the letters Ba, baby, boo, boo. So like that, they are also reading, and they are chanted, or they are telling. And again, they could be seen the old, the village man, old Haser. He is reading with his primer. Primer means it is the basic book of the language. So he is reading with his primer. And he is reading and trembling because he also getting emotion. And one more thing is he doesn't know the language well. So he is also considering like a children or child. So all at once the church clock struck 12. Then the angelus. At the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussians returning from drill sounded under our windows. Mr. Heyman stood up very pale in his chair. I never saw him look so tall. So immediately they heard the church clock struck 12 o'clock. Okay, church clock struck 12. So they can hear the striking the 12. Here angelus, which meaning in the Roman Catholic churches. So they often said this is the prayer, the Hail Mary prayer. So in the morning and in the evening at noon also they said in the Roman Catholic church. That is only angelus. So now the clock struck 12. At the same time, the Prussian rulers also returning from their drill. And he gets up now, Mr. Franz, he gets up from his chair and he is very pale. Then he tried to speak, but he is not able to speak. Something was choking him, which means something was blocking him. So he gathered all his strength and he turned to write on the blackboard. Then he turned to the blackboard, took a piece of chalk and bearing on with all his might, he wrote as a large he could, Vive la France. He has written the word Vive la France, which means long live France. This is his last farewell words. And then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word he made a gesture to us with his hand, school is dismissed, you may go. So again then he tried to speak something, but he is not able to speak. So he just give the gesture through the class, the school is dismissed, you may go. So this is the lesson. So just we can recall the whole story. First the narrator Franz, he was late to one particular morning, he was late at school. He was afraid because he did not learn the lesson of participles. So he thought spending the day out. And on his way, he saw the crowd in front of the bulletin board. So that day also, they put up some news, new news. Put up some new news in the bulletin board. And that day he was afraid because surely he will get a punishment from his teacher, a scolding from his teacher. But that day nothing was happened. And instead of that, his teacher spoke very politely, very kindly. And after recovering his fear, he noticed his teacher dressed the best attire, the grand dress, and it makes him getting confusion. And he also noticed his village man. They are also usually the last bench was empty in the classroom, but that particular day the village man also occupying the back of the room, and it is also made him getting more confusion. And now Mr. Hammer, he is telling this is our last lesson I shall give you, because the Berlin has ordered to teach only German in the schools of these two districts. Now he understood. Now he got the answer, now he cleared, he got all the questions, now he get the answer, because why his teacher dressed the best attire, and why the people are crowded in front of the bulletin board, and why the village people are occupying in the classroom, and why the school entire environment is so quiet. So now he gets the answer. And one more thing is, get the answer. Then the usual scene of the school is the great whistle and the lesson repeated in unison, the opening and closing of the when the school began. But that day nothing was happened. Everything's quite just like a Sunday morning. Okay. Then he heard the news. This is the last class of the French lesson, and his teacher also going away with them. But previously or earlier, he was afraid of his teacher, his French teacher, Mr. Hamel's iron ruler and his scolding. But now he started to liking his teacher and his love towards his teacher, Mr. Hamel. So this is the contrast we can see in his mind. Then he got the answer why the village men are occupying in the classroom means to pay their respect and gratitude towards Mr. Hamel, his French teacher, because who has been teaching for 40 years in the same school. So that's why the village people also occupying the last benches. And all the thought is going in mind. The teacher called him to recite the rule for participles, but he gets nervous because he does not know the lesson, so he fumbles after speaking a few words. But now Mr. Hamel said, "You won't afraid, little friends, because I never scold you. I will not scold you. This is our reality, because we are the human being. We used to postpone our works. Usually we are postponing our works. We are thinking we have a plenty of time. But now you see where we come out. This is our last class, so they did not learn anything. And he take the classes." Then Mr. Hamel, he blamed himself and his author's parents also, the narrator parents also, because the narrator parents, they are expecting money rather providing education, and he didn't make the students to learn the lesson. Instead of, he sent the students to watering his plants. So he blamed himself, and he prizes his French language. This is the most beautiful language. It is the clearest and logical language. So all should know the language. And sarcastically he says the French people the German soldiers laugh at all the French people or the Frenchmen because they do not know their own language, their mother tongue. So definitely they will laugh. And then he take the grammar lesson. Now he understood everything at once. The Mr. Franz understood everything at once now, because now he started love towards his teacher, as it was his last class, is the last lesson. So he started liking his class. So finally he couldn't speak anything. Mr. Hamel, his French teacher, because the church clock struck 12, the Bushian Road soldiers also returning from drill. So he gets a very pain and he is very sad moment. So he started to speak something, but he couldn't speak anything. Something choked his throat and something blocked in his throat. So he stopped and turned right on the board, Vive la France, which means long live France. So this is the last story. Finally he gave gesture through the class. The school is dismissed, you may go. This is the story of the lesson. Through this story the narrator tells the themes the two themes he is mentioned here. The first one is we are the human being. We have the tendency to postponing their works. Okay, the man keeps postponing the next day. Okay, today if we are not able to do means we have plenty of time, so we can do it on the next day. So they are postponing, but the life is oblivious. The life is subject to change. This is the first thing. So we should not postpone our works. We should do it at on the day itself. Okay, we should not postpone any works. And the second theme is all the citizens. It is the duty of the citizens. We should know our mother tongue. We should know our own language, because the language is the key to freedom. These two message only the narrator tells us. Okay. First thing is we should not postpone the work. Second thing is we should learn our own language thoroughly. So now I will ask some questions whether you have understand or not. First question, what kind of news was usually put up on the bulletin board? What kind of news? All the bad news were put up on the bulletin board. What are the bad news? The lost battles, the order of the commanding officer, the traps. These are the bad news were put up on the bulletin board. And what was the usual scene when school began every day? So what was the usual scene every day? They used to sing in the atmosphere of the school. So the usual scene is a great bustle, the opening and closing of the desk, the lesson repeated in the unison, the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. These are the usual scene when the school began every day. Then other than the students who were present in the class, who were present in the particular day, so the village men, the old hussar, the former mayor, the former postmaster, they were sitting at the back of the bench or they were present in the classroom. Why did Mr. Hemel say it was the last French lesson? Why he said, this is the last class I shall give you? Why he said, because Berlin has added to teach only German in the schools of these two districts. So Mr. Hemel says this is the last class of French lesson. Then what was Franz asked to tell? Was he able to answer? What Mr. Hemel asked to Franz? Mr. Franz asked to tell the participles of the rules of the participles. But no, he was not able to answer. Was he able to answer? No, he was not able to answer. Why did Mr. Hemel blame himself? Why Mr. Hemel blamed himself? Because Mr. Hemel blamed himself because he made the students or he sent the students watering his plants instead of studying his lessons. And whenever he wanted to go fishing, immediately he declared or announced holiday for them. What did Mr. Hemel say about the French language? Mr. Hemel said the French language is the most beautiful language in the world and it is the clearest and the logical language. So all the French people should know their language. Mainly the language is the key to get freedom. How many years had been Mr. Hemel in the village? Mr. Hemel had been in the village for 40 years. Mr. Hemel was gazing at many things. What were they? So what are the things he gazed at the classroom? So Mr. Hemel looked around the classroom or gazing around the classroom. He is looking at the bench and desk and looking at the garden and in front of the class. These are the things he is just trying to memorize his scene or fix his scene. And when and how did Mr. Hemel bid farewell to the class? So when he bid the farewell, when the church clock struck 12, he bid the farewell. So these words, Vive la France, which means long live France. This is his words of the farewell bid. Why were the old villagers sitting in the last desk? Why were the old villagers sitting in the last desk? The old villagers were sitting in the last desk in order to pay respect and gratitude towards Mr. Hemel. So they were occupying the last desk. And what were the thoughts of the narrator's parents, the Fran's parents? They expected he should work at a farm or the sawmill and earn little more money rather than providing him education. These things only the France parents also expected. So now Mr. Hamer blamed Mr. France. So thank you children. Through this story we learned the two themes. The first one is we should not postpone the things. Okay, we should do it on the day itself. Okay, whenever we get the time, we should finish it. And the second theme is every citizen. It is the duty of the every citizen. We should learn our language. Okay, we should hold our language because language is the key to get the freedom. Thank you, children. I hope you understood well. Thank you.